5 mark, so we'll start getting to go ahead. Our presenters are all ready to go. So I will quickly run down a couple of reminders just for us all. And let me double check before I get going. Yes, cell phones are in mute or off. It's been pretty good. We only had a couple of glitches yesterday. Please keep up the good work. For presenters and those asking questions, make sure you're close to the mic. Please do not use acronyms. Use the full wording. This is to help the interpreters. Their job is hard enough as it is. Please be helpful. Thank you. We ask that as best you can, you wear your mask. And just a reminder that when it does come time for questions and clarifications, that they are to be related to the land use plan and the presentation that just happened. And the last point before I check for housekeeping issues is when you go to present, please state your name and the organization for transcription purposes. And I'll ask Sharon for housekeeping.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to day 4 of our public hearing here in Rankin Inlet. Just to review the emergency exits, the exit that you entered in, and over here, bathrooms in the front, snacks and everything are still on the back wall. Help yourself. And we're looking forward to a very productive day. So good morning and welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
As we settle in, and I believe the federal government representatives are ready to go. And Terry, are you starting? Okay. Please go ahead. Oh, sorry. The one thing that I was reminded about is Sean Lester, Vice Chair, Acting Chair. I got to get that in once a day. No more, because maybe one more. But anyways, go ahead, Terry.
Goedemiddag. Itchivotali.
Thank you, Chair.
Sivulok ba mi kay kinang mangama Terry Outla.
Terry Outla, Director General, Ekalud Office, Regional Director General Atilig. I started in March this year, and the federal government, we are going to introduce ourselves. And thank you, Rankin Inlet, for your hospitality, hosting these proceedings. And thank you, Nunavut Planning Commission, for your invitation for us to participate. And federal government, I will mention their names first of all. Spencer Dewar, Director of Resource Management, Jeff Hard, Michelle Claire Rock,
Department of National Defense Roxanne McInnes, Senior Urban Planner, Transport Canada Anita Goodman, Regional Manager of Environmental Programs, Jaydeep Johar, Manager of Marine Safety. Justice Canada, Neil Modi. So before I get into the presentation, I just want to be clear about the Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada mandate, which is basically Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada continues to renew the nation-to-nation, Crown, government-to-government relationship between Canada and First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. Modernized government of Canada and support their vision of self-determination and lead the government of Canada's work in the North. So again, the government of Canada would like to thank the Nunavut Planning Commission for the opportunity to review the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan and to present here at the public hearings. The government of Canada would also like to thank the community of Rankin Inlet for hosting this public hearing for the Kivalliq region.
Terry, Terry, could you be closer to the mic, please? Thanks.
Developing a first-generation Nunavut land use plan is a difficult, complex task. And the Government of Canada recognizes the efforts and commitments of the Nunavut Planning Commission. A couple of speakers yesterday mentioned that there will be differing views, there will be some discourse, there will be ambiguity, but that's the nature of this exercise. And I've always felt that how the Nunavut Agreement was ratified and the work up towards ratification, the negotiations, the many years, the long hours, in my opinion, has created a design, I think, that is very appropriate to make sure everyone is included when it comes to these big issues like planning and developing a land use plan. We need to hear from everyone. Not everyone is going to agree, but at the same time, it's something that's needed, and it's something that I feel very strongly about. The beauty in the design of the land claim, developing and instituting these public governments to assist in the process of planning, in my opinion, is something that was amazing forethought of those individuals that were involved. And I'd like to take this moment to recognize James Itulu, who was there. So if I could ask everyone to just give a round of applause for James. As well as, he spoke yesterday as well, Tagak Curley. So just the amount of effort and work that's been put in to get to where we are now is because of individuals like those two that we just recognized. The principles and objectives in Article 11 of the Nunavut Agreement and Part 2 of the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act require an understanding of how people are supported by the land, socially, culturally, and economically. The values and priorities of residents, and particularly the aspirations Inuit have to determine their own path to future well-being. The result must be a plan that meets these aspirations, guides development, and also provides for conservation and other uses of the land. Since the plan was released in July 2021, the Government of Canada has been working to provide productive recommendations to the Commission, as well as working with the Government of Nunavut and the designated Inuit organizations to discuss issues we have in common. The Government of Canada continues to be committed to this process for the benefit of Nunavut and all Canadians. The mandate of the Government of Canada under the Nunavut Agreement and the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act is an approving party to land use plans in Nunavut. In addition, it shares a role in ensuring the principles and objectives of the planning process are met. This submission was developed on behalf of the Government of Canada, in part by the Canadian Coast Guard, Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada, Department of National Defence, Environmental and Climate Change Canada, Fisheries and Oceans Canada, Global Affairs Canada, Justice Canada, Natural Resources Canada, Parks Canada, and Transport Canada. As I mentioned, there are some representatives from each of those departments, and some of those are in the hearings either in person or viewing on the live stream. And the summary of each department's mandates can be found in the annex at the end of this presentation, which are available at the front in Inuktitut, English, and French. The Crown has a duty to consult because of its role in deciding whether to approve the draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. The Crown relies on the Commission's process to assist with fulfilling the duty to consult. When drafting and revising the plan, the Commission considers comments at the hearings and community meetings, as well as any written submissions. These could include any concerns brought forward on potential impacts to Section 35 rights. The Government of Canada encourages Indigenous organizations and governments to identify to the Commission any potential adverse impacts to their rights and how these may be addressed through the draft plan. The Government of Canada remains actively engaged throughout the Commission's process, listening to Inuit concerns and seeking any information on how they may be resolved. And they will also be doing that next week in Thompson and listen to other Indigenous groups down that way. The purpose of this presentation is to provide a high-level overview of the comments and recommendations submitted to the Commission by the Government of Canada on the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan. The written submissions we provided to the Commission are on the public record. They are more comprehensive and contain more detail on the issues than we have time here to present today. It is important to note that although we are identifying issues that need resolution, the Government of Canada is confident and committed to a collaborative process that will make progress towards developing a sound, well-supported, and clear first-generation land use plan that can be successfully implemented. The rest of our presentation will focus on key outstanding issues and recommendations for how they may be resolved. We will then provide some conclusions and talk about a process for moving forward. The Government of Canada's review is guided by our priority expectations for its first-generation land use plan. These include that the planning and resulting plan legally comply with the Nunavut Agreement and the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act. The plan must be consistent with federal commitments and policies. The planning process has credibility, so it is clear that the development of the plan is supported by a meaningful, inclusive, and transparent public and stakeholder consultation process. As well, the plan must be clear, understandable, and provide certainty for users. That the plan must be practical, implementable, and conformity requirements must be clear. And finally, that the plan should contribute to the efficiency of Nunavut's integrated regulatory system. Our review is also guided by the Commission's broad planning policy objectives and goals that were developed by the Commission with the Government of Canada, Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, and the Government of Nunavut. The 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan has addressed many concerns that the Government of Canada brought forward in 2017 and 2018. There have been significant improvements. However, several substantive issues remain, and these important issues should be addressed and resolved prior to the plan being submitted for approval. The key outstanding issues from the Government of Canada include clarity and certainty in how the plan should be read and are critical to successful implementation of the plan. There have been improvements from previous drafts, but there are still areas that need work. For instance, overlapping land use designations remain. These should be eliminated from the plan, or clear guidance should be provided on how overlapping land use designations are to be applied to avoid ambiguous interpretation. Language in the plan requirements should also be improved to add certainty. The Government of Canada recommends adding guidance on how to interpret the application of the plan, especially where designations overlap, and revising language to be clear and in line with legislation. For example, replacing the term no person with no proponent would be in line with the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act definition of proponent. On the mapping, maps are the basis for being able to understand and apply any land use plan. The accuracy of the maps that show the zoning in the Nunavut Land Use Plan are necessary for project proponents and regulators, as well as the Commission, to make decisions about the requirements that the plan intends to apply to a project. Here, as an example, we selected a map of Ikharututya to provide an example of overlapping lands that are legally recognized. in addition to those land use designations found in the plan. As you can see, the overlap in this case is quite extensive. The government in Canada understands there were some challenges experienced by the Commission in accessing certain map data and understands that work is underway to address this issue. Before a final plan is submitted, the Government of Canada recommends that the Commission revise all maps in the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan to improve their accuracy and use a consistent mapping standard for the land use plan. Now we'll speak to finding the balance between economic development and conservation and the treatment of existing rights. The Government of Canada recognizes the efforts the Commission has made and the challenges it has faced. Nunavut includes important habitat for caribou and wildlife, which are critical to the well-being of people and the environment. As well, there are existing rights related to mineral tenure and other land users. At the same time, there are important rights in the Nunavut Agreement, including the ability of Inuit to manage their own land, to benefit from development, and to harvest. In our view, the plan cannot and should not be counted on as a solution to protecting all of these values on its own. As someone had said yesterday, it's not a one-size-fits-all. There are a number of mechanisms available in Nunavut that will help to achieve these purposes. The plan's restrictions on land use in key caribou habitats should enable economic opportunities for Nunavummiut and still ensure protection of the caribou. This must be done in a manner that respects the rights associated with Inuit-owned land. Overlap and conflict between existing mineral tenure and mineral projects and year-round prohibitions to support caribou habitat still exist in the plan. Greater clarity and certainty is required to ensure that benefits and rights guaranteed in the Nunavut Agreement can still be realized. Barren ground caribou population numbers have declined over time, which generates concern amongst all the participants here. The Government of Canada's objective is that whatever approach the plan takes to barren ground caribou, it supports healthy populations that can support sustainable harvesting into the future. We think the planning process in Nunavut is a key opportunity for parties to work together to find the right contribution the plan can make to conserving caribou, whether that be through a regional approach to zoning, possibly including mobile caribou measures, as mentioned yesterday, or other effective conservation measures. It is important that the Commission ensures that it knows whether the selected approach is working. Ongoing monitoring will inform if measures are effective. At the same time, the value the mineral economy brings to Nunavut must be a key consideration. A healthy mining sector provides opportunities for Nunavummiut. It provides employment, contracting, training, and vital contributions to government, Inuit organizations, and communities that allows support of local programming. We all know it's very expensive to be able to go out and harvest. And we all know that we have to have a means of being able to bring in income so that we can continue the harvest. Fuel isn't cheap. Snowmobiles are not cheap. Boats and motors are not cheap. So we need to look at how we balance all that. We need to ensure the land use plan does not close the door on economic potential when other regulatory tools can mitigate impacts to the environment. By example, mineral tenure covers 2.5% of Nunavut. Over a third of that tenure, of that 2.5%, is overlapped with limited use zones that prohibit mineral exploration, development, and related activities. Many mineral projects and mines are on both Crown and Inuit-owned land, which are overlapped by limited use zoning, as shown in this figure. And this will limit the development of new mineral projects and mines and the ability of existing mines to further develop. The map on this slide shows that many projects in limited use zones overlap both Crown and Inuit-owned land, and so we would need to take a consistent approach to zoning. As well, a number of projects are fully enclosed within limited use zones with no means of year-round access. This could prevent these projects from advancing. The draft plan applies a limited use designation to 3 of Nunavut's 4 active mines, including the Meliadine project outside of Kanalthanik. In addition to the land use plan, these projects are further regulated with a view to protecting the environment. They all possess Nunavut Impact Review Board project certificates, Nunavut Water Board Type A water licenses, Crown land use permits and leases, and authorizations from the regional Inuit associations, collectively tailoring a robust set of terms and conditions under which the projects must operate. The Government of Canada recommends that the Commission rezone areas where existing mineral tenure overlaps with a limited use designation to mixed use. There should be no overlap of limited use zoning with mineral tenure. However, the plan should continue to keep information on important caribou habitat, which should be retained as a valued ecosystem components designation. Valued ecosystem components, acronym VEC. And that designation is to ensure that it is considered by proponents and other parts of the regulatory regime. The approach in the current draft plan to address the issue of overlap between limited use zones and existing mineral rights is to include a list of projects in Appendix A that would be exceptions to the limited use prohibition on future mineral development. Should the Commission remain committed to using Appendix A to list properties that are an exception to the zoning, the Government of Canada recommends that the Commission rezone limited use areas where they overlap with Nunavut's operating mines to mixed use areas with no applicable prohibitions, seasonal restrictions, and setbacks. As well, information on important caribou habitats not already identified as valued ecosystem components should be retained under the valued ecosystem components designation to ensure it is considered by proponents and regulators. In addition, all remaining mineral tenure that overlaps with limited use designation should be included in Appendix A and clarify that the prohibitions for exploration, development, and ancillary activities, example roads and quarrying, do not apply to new project proposals or significant modifications to current projects. The Government of Canada recommends that the Commission work with Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs Canada and holders of existing mineral rights and interests to ensure that any existing or future projects arising from existing mineral tenure that will be impacted by proposed limited use areas are accurately identified under Appendix A of the plan. Now we'll focus on marine transportation. The Government of Canada understands the importance of the marine environment to Inuit and Inuit culture. Also important is the need for the plan to reflect a balance of the Nunavut Planning Commission's broad planning policies, objectives, and goals. For the Government of Canada, this means the plan must manage marine transportation in a way that protects the environment, promotes conservation planning and community well-being, and encourages sustainable economic development. Given this, a number of key considerations, as noted on the slide, have guided the Government of Canada's comments about marine transportation. Plan requirements for the protection of the marine environment, such as setbacks around walrus haulouts, should not prevent the delivery of vital services required to maintain healthy communities or to protect the environment. The Government of Canada supports the exceptions in the draft plan for activities such as community resupply, emergencies, and safe navigation. We have recommended to the Commission that other activities such as law enforcement monitoring and the placement and maintenance of navigational aids be added to the list of exceptions in the plan. And the plan defines certain vital services for clarity. For example, without definition, the meaning of safe navigation could be unclear. Someone could argue they can travel near a walrus haulout when they think it is safe to do so. However, the Government of Canada's interpretation of safe navigation is that a vessel can travel near a walrus haulout only when it is required for the safety of the ship, crew, and passengers. The Government of Canada is also seeking confirmation that the Commission's conformity determinations will also include the exemptions granted to the Minister of National Defence within the Nunavut Agreement. This will help ensure the plan complies with the exemptions of the Nunavut Agreement and improve clarity and certainty for users. The plan includes seasonal prohibitions on ice breaking, seasonal prohibitions on ice breaking through any part of the Northwest Passage could be problematic. A specific concern is related to an agreement between the Government of Canada and the United States. This agreement is a legally binding treaty through which we essentially agree to disagree, and which requires Canada to allow passage to United States icebreakers through the Northwest Passage. We need to ensure the Government of Canada is able to consent to navigation through the Northwest Passage. We intend that such an exception would be used in limited circumstances, and such vessels should still follow the plan where they can. Having the final plan include an exception for individual vessel movements is one way that will help the Government of Canada to meet its international legal obligations. These individual vessel movements would still be required to follow applicable laws and regulations. In addition, when we are contacted by vessels prior to their transit, we communicate about environmental considerations, such as ecologically sensitive areas or known mammal migrations, as well as recommended routing. It is our experience that these vessels take this advice into consideration. When shipping constitutes a project under the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessments Act, as for example in the case of a mining development project, the Nunavut Land Use Plan and potentially the Nunavut Impact Review Board processes would apply. The Government of Canada has also recommended that the Commission consider a collaborative process rather than ice-breaking restrictions, similar to the collaborative process that has been included in the draft plan for on-ice travel routes, which includes consultation with communities. And now we'll focus on national marine conservation areas. The Nunavut Land Use Plan will only apply to Talurutiup Ibanga under the Canada National Marine Conservation Areas Act once it comes into effect. A joint Inuit Canada Co-Management Board makes consensus decisions that include Inuit Haryamayutahangit for managing the marine conservation area. Some of the prohibited activities listed in the plan requirements may change after legal establishments, as the co-management board and planning processes will make decisions on appropriate activities. Migratory bird setbacks will apply to the key habitat areas located in Talurutiup Imanga. The plan requirements currently do not address this. It is recommended that activities that may be changed after establishment be identified as interim prohibitions to avoid confusion with future management direction. It is further recommended that the migratory bird setbacks identified in Table 1 of the Nunavut Land Use Plan be included in the plan requirements for the National Marine Conservation Area. And the Government of Canada has provided some suggested wording for Section 3.1.2 to clarify the difference between the National Marine Conservation Area awaiting establishment and future National Marine Conservation Areas. In regards to disposal at sea, the Canadian Environmental Protection Act governs disposal activities in Canadian and international waters near Canada. The Act prohibits disposal at sea without a permit. The Government of Canada prefers that the disposal at sea prohibitions be removed from the draft plan and suggests that disposal at sea continues to be addressed on a case-by-case basis under the Canadian Environmental Protection Act using the mandated consultation process. As required under the Act, the Disposal at Sea program will continue to consult on permits in northern waters to address environmental concerns, including those in marine conservation areas and limited use areas. It should also be noted that vessel discharges are regulated under the Canada Shipping Act 2001 and the Arctic Waters Pollution Prevention Act and their regulations. Prior to going on to the next topic, I've provided a link. Your information technology folks. In conclusion of my presentation, if it's okay with permission of the acting chair, I want to be able to put that video up for the benefit of all the people here in the room. But I'll ask that question again once I finish my conclusion here. So I'll continue. In regards to operations at Department of National Defense sites, the Government of Canada is re-evaluating the prohibitions of all uses in areas zoned as limited use for military facilities. There may be an opportunity to allow for some uses that would not conflict with national defense and national security. The planning process would ideally include the Department of National Defense in decision-making and approval process, which would allow activities not contrary to those of the department to advance. This may be achieved through a valued socio-economic component designation for military, but would require a clear definition and what planning considerations are afforded as a result. The Government of Canada is seeking to strike a balance between having to uphold its national defense and national security mandate and remaining a partner in Nunavut. To summarize, the Government of Canada recognizes the importance of land use planning in Nunavut's regulatory system and will continue its role on a path towards a plan that can be accepted. We believe the issues presented by the Government of Canada can be resolved through continued collaboration with all involved. The Government of Canada, along with Nunavut Dungavik Incorporated, the regional Inuit associations, and the Government of Nunavut recognize that issues related to Inuit-owned land, Inuit impact benefit agreements, and consultation as they relate to the land use plan are important issues to understand. The parties have begun discussions on these topics in hopes to advise the Commission on a path forward to resolve these issues. The Government of Canada supports the Commission's working with the Government of Canada, the Government of Nunavut, Nunavut Dungavik Incorporated, and the regional Inuit associations to develop a post-hearing process to refine the draft plan to collaboratively address concerns raised in the submission and at the public hearings. The Government of Canada will also continue to listen to Inuit and Indigenous concerns, noting how they may be resolved, and will take any further steps necessary to ensure its duty to Indigenous and Inuit rights holders has been met. Before we go to questions on our presentation and the video, the Government of Canada would like to address some questions that were asked at these hearings. Our representatives from Alkviet asked for information on the Denisulin negotiations, and representatives from Coral Harbor on marine transportation. For the Denisolan questions, the government of Canada is negotiating 2 comprehensive land claim agreements with the Athabasca Denisolan and the Gotilnene Koditine Dene, respectively. Negotiations are at the final stages. The parties are not in a position to disclose contents of the agreements until such time that negotiations are concluded due to existing confidentiality agreements. An interim land withdrawal is in place to facilitate the conclusion of Aboriginal land claim agreements. The interim land withdrawal area reflects boundaries agreed to by Canada, the Athabasca Denisolan, Gotilnene Koditine Dene, the government Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, and the Kivalliq Inuit Association. So that's on the question on the outstanding negotiations for the land claims just south of Alkvia. For marine transportation, we have heard questions about the map that Jonathan shared on Monday showing shipping routes. The map that was shown by the Nunavut Planning Commission was developed for discussion purposes and was shared with the Commission for their information. Outside of the planning process, Transport Canada and the Canadian Coast Guard are working on identifying priority areas to improve marine navigation safety and areas for vessels to avoid. Engagement has taken place, and we will continue to engage so that we can continue to hear about locations that are considered sensitive and that participants would like vessels to avoid. Your comments in regards to shipping route near Coates Island are noted, and we'll ensure to forward this information to our colleagues. Again, the Government of Canada would like to thank the Commission for this opportunity to present its views on the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan to the Commission, to the other participants in the hearing, and to the public. And prior to going into answering any questions, if the acting chair permits, we'd like to show a video at this time.
If it could get downloaded and work, we'll show it. Are we good to go? Looks like we're booting it up.
Okay, so this is a video that Transport Canada would like to play. It's short, which provides an overview of how ships are regulated, monitored, inspected, with particular reference to the Canadian Arctic, including collaborative work with communities under Oceans Protections Plan initiative towards safeguarding caribou crossings, as an example, and hunters and trappers travel routes on ice. We hope that this video will be helpful to community members and answer some of the questions raised earlier in the hearings. And after the video, in order to promote safe boating practices for pleasure crafts transport, Canada has made tags with QR codes. I believe each commissioner's received one. We hope to have more available, but at the same time, we'll make sure that the link is shared with the Commission. And it will provide access to the Transport Canada publication Safe Boating Guide electronically. And there are some tags available if you want. Feel free to approach me, and we have Jaydeep Johar here as well if there are any questions regarding the tags. And as you will note in the video, Jaydeep Johar is in that video, so after the video presentation he can be available for autographs. Go ahead with...
Okay.
From an ultra-modern bulk carrier ship carrying a cargo bound for Vancouver, to a crab or lobster fisher tending traps off our Atlantic coast, to fishers bringing in their catch off Kujuwarapik as their community has done for thousands of years. Our relationship with Canada's oceans, lakes, and rivers is essential. The movement of people and goods by water has propelled our economy and has shown us the importance of respecting and protecting our natural environment. Responsibility for Canada's oceans and waterways is one of Transport Canada's most important roles. Our focus is to prevent, prepare, and respond with several partners, including Indigenous communities and the Canadian Coast Guard. We're proud of the work we do and our record of success. Canada is signatory to many international conventions and agreements that govern how shipping is carried out worldwide. While international laws set the broad worldwide framework, Canada keeps a keen eye on every ship that is bound for or departing from our shores. When ships reach Canadian waters, Canadian rules and regulations set a tight safety framework for all vessels in the 16 designated shipping control zones, including the Canada Shipping Act 2001, the Arctic Waters Pollution Prevention Act, and the Arctic Shipping Safety and Pollution Prevention Regulations. In addition to these Canadian regulations and acts, the International Polar Code provides a mandatory framework for all ships operating in the North. The Polar Code and Canada's regulatory framework work together for safe navigation and environmental protection in the Arctic by reducing the risk of accidental spills and ensuring ships navigate safely with trained shipboard personnel. Let's take a look at vessel traffic in Canada's Arctic region.
Hi, I'm Jaydeep Johar, Manager with Transport Canada's Marine Safety and Security, Prairie and Northern Region. I have spent most of my life working in marine safety, and I'm dedicated to the protection of this pristine environment. Our Arctic waters receive ships from all over the world. Let's track the voyage of an inbound ship loaded with cargo. 4 days, or about 1,500 nautical miles out from Canadian waters. All ships inbound to Canada make initial contact with Transport Canada at the Marine Security Operations Center to provide pre-arrival information about the ship, its destination, tonnage, cargo, crew, and more. This information is shared with the Department of National Defense, the RCMP, and the Canada Border Services Agency as part of a comprehensive security threat assessment. Ships are also required to exchange or treat their ballast water. This prevents foreign organisms from coming in with the ship as it sails into Canadian waters. Before entering Canadian Arctic waters, ships report to the Canadian Coast Guard in Iqaluit. As part of this report, the ship's master must submit a sail plan and identify any mechanical deficiencies or operational requirements the ship may have. All vessels operating in Canadian Arctic waters must use low sulfur fuel to reduce emissions, which improves air quality for everyone. Transport Canada's National Aerial Surveillance Program is an essential part of Canada's efforts to protect the maritime environment and marine life, while ensuring a safer shipping industry. As ships navigate along the Arctic waters, NASP aircraft monitor vessel traffic, identify oil spills and other marine pollutants. Because ships know they could be seen at any time, NASP is a powerful deterrent for ships discharging oil at sea. In Canadian Arctic waters, there is complete prohibition of pollution or oil discharge from ships, except in special circumstances where it is strictly regulated. In the event of a spill, the polluter pays system ensures that vessels arriving in the Arctic region share responsibility for oil spills in the Canadian waters. Much like air traffic control systems, each ship of a certain size is tracked and monitored by the Canadian Coast Guard Communications Systems and Transport Canada's Regional Duty Officer. The information about the ship, its previous ports of call, itinerary, and any issues or problems the ships may have is continually updated, and it is critical for the safety and security of all vessels and ports in Canada. 90% of consumer goods destined for the Arctic arrive by marine ships and smaller community resupply vessels, mostly during the summer sailing months of July to October. Icebreaker vessels are essential to navigation in the Arctic as they provide a clear passage through ice at sea. This allows for the continued safe and sustainable marine shipping in the region. However, when icebreakers push through the thickened ice, this potentially creates a dangerous situation for wildlife or Inuit and northern hunters who may become stranded on ice floes. To reduce this risk, Inuit community members, Transport Canada, and the Canadian Coast Guard recently co-developed the first seasonal notice to mariners for the Kitikmeot region. Vessels must provide 1 week's notice of their passage to communities to minimize risks to people, migrating caribou, and wildlife traveling across sea ice. This is part of our broader commitment to work in partnership with Inuit communities to advance marine safety for the protection of the unique ecosystem of the Arctic region. Ships may also undergo a port state control inspection carried out by a Transport Canada's Marine Safety Inspector. In keeping with international commitments, Transport Canada inspectors will board the ship to make sure that it meets international and domestic rules and regulations before it can sail to its next destination. Once community resupply vessels have unloaded their cargo, they head off to their next port of call. Beyond our world-leading marine safety and security system, our partnership with Indigenous communities are helping to strengthen Canada's marine economy and environment, especially in the development of a skilled workforce. To create jobs and further increase marine safety in Indigenous and coastal communities, we have developed a marine training program across 3 regions to help underrepresented groups such as women, Indigenous peoples, Northerners, and Inuit access marine training and job opportunities within the marine industry.
We're proud to say that our marine safety and security system works. Despite increases in marine traffic, spills and incidents have declined dramatically in the last 20 years, and we'll continue to improve as technology evolves and we strengthen our partnerships with Indigenous and coastal communities. This is one in a series of 5 videos about Canada's marine safety and security system. Find out more at canada.ca/oceans-protection-plan.
Thank you very much for that addition to your presentation. It's about 10:15. We'll take a 15-minute break, and then we'll do the questions, if that works for you. Okay. 15-minute break, please. Thanks. And we will continue with our standard procedure, Nunavut Planning Commission staff questions, community delegate questions, registered participant questions, and then public members. Quick reminder, the questions are to be related to the land use plan and the presentation that you just heard. We will start with Nunavut Planning Commission questions. And the first question will be coming from Sharon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sharon Halawak, Executive Director for the Nunavut Planning Commission. First, Terry, I'd like to thank the Government of Canada team for your presentation. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the Government of Canada team for giving your guidance and input and working with the Commission on the content of the draft plan and our working relationship going forward. I do have a couple questions to start. First, for the record, can Canada acknowledge the Commission authority as outlined in the Nunavut Agreement as stated in Article 11.11.8.2? The land use planning process shall apply to Inuit-owned lands. Land use plans shall take into account Inuit goals and objectives for Inuit-owned lands. That's our first question. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Please go ahead, Terry.
Thank you, Chair.
Sharon,
Sharon.
thank you for that question. It does state, as you said, Sharon, in Article 11.8.2, the land use planning process shall apply to Inuit-owned lands, and then it continues, land use plans shall take into account Inuit goals and objectives for Inuit-owned lands. And I'll go a little further. Under Article 17, when you look at the purposes of Inuit-owned lands, specifically Article 17.1.3, Inuit-owned lands shall be, or Inuit-owned lands shall, to the extent possible, provide for a mix of the characteristics outlined above in order to secure balanced economic development. However, the relative weighting or weighing of the characteristics with respect to any particular community or region shall turn on the actual and potential economic opportunities at hand and the particular community or regional preferences. So when Article 11.8.2 specifies that Nunavut land use plan shall apply to Inuit-owned lands, it goes further to say that the land use plans shall take into account Inuit goals and objectives for Inuit-owned lands. So my interpretation of that is, it's up to the regional Inuit associations as title holders, as well as Nunavut Incorporated as title holder for the subsurface, where the regions are surface only. And it would be up to those organizations to meet with the communities, to get the Inuit perspective collectively, and to determine those objectives themselves, considering that they are the title holders. Beyond that, I can't really say anymore. It's really more an issue that the communities, Inuit within those communities, as represented by the Nunavut Incorporated and the regional Inuit associations, need to come to together and make those determinations themselves.
Thank you for the answer. Sharon, you have another one? Go ahead.
Yes, Sharon Halwak, Executive Director with the Nunavut Planning Commission. Terry, thank you for acknowledging Article 17. I guess the Commission looks to the signatory parties and asks for your guidance. Specifically, we've heard from the community members, we've heard their priorities, how they would like their land managed, including the limited use areas with regards to caribou calving grounds. And the Commission does see that there are varying views, being that of the communities and the signatory parties and the designated Inuit organizations. Could you provide the Commission with guidance of going forward where or how solutions for these issues can be resolved, and give guidance to the Commission of, as the Commission is responsible to listen to everyone and give great weight to Inuit priorities and values and the residents of the planning regions? Could you give us guidance of how we resolve these conflicts? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the question. Please go ahead, Terry.
And thank you, Sharon, for that very complex question. As I said earlier in the introduction to my presentation, there will always be some discourse, some ambiguity, and that the beauty and the design of how the land claim was negotiated and eventually ratified provides a lot of clear direction, but at the same time, there are some gray areas as well. When it comes to the parties, at the end of the day, to determine whether or not the land use plan will be approved amongst the three parties, it's to be based on consensus. It's to be based on whether or not, from the Government of Canada's perspective, that the duty to consult was carried out, and that the Government of Nunavut and the Inuit organizations are happy with what was provided for their approval as well. As to how we can move forward, it was Tagak Curley yesterday that said that a one-size-fits-all approach sometimes can be almost impossible to achieve. We are looking at a very vast geographical area with various interests, and how you come to the determination as to what would be limited use areas, what would be mixed use. Again, there's going to be all these competing users and rights holders. And we have full confidence from the Government of Canada perspective that because of where we are right now, the discussions, the questions, and sometimes the answers or the non-answers, it's a way of trying to get to the final plan. As for a specific recommendation, we just need to keep talking and see what we can do to provide for the best available options that we have, and to come out with something that's comprehensive and that is implementable, and to see if we can get to that point going through this exercise. Thank you.
Thank you for the answer. Do you have a follow-up, Sharon? Okay. Nunavut Planning Commission staff still have questions, but Jonathan will be asking the next one.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Jonathan Savoy with the Nunavut Planning Commission. Thanks to Terry and your team for the presentation this morning. On the process moving forward, the Government of Canada expresses an interest in working collectively to resolve outstanding issues, in particular with the government of Nunavut, Nunavut-Tungavik, as well as the regional Inuit associations. Now, we recognize that that process will need to occur following the submission of a recommended land use plan. But we're wondering if the Government of Canada anticipates being able to collectively work and potentially address at least some of the outstanding issues before the January 10th, 2023 deadline for final submissions, before the Commission reconsiders the draft plan. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Please go ahead, Terry.
Yes.
Thank you. Jonathan, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the direct answer on the previous question. It's appreciated. One topic you covered in your presentation was the lack of inclusion of some plan requirements within the Tuluria-Bemanga proposed National Marine Conservation Area. I'd note that the Commission chose to simplify in the 2021 draft Nunavut Land Use Plan some of the designations in that area, anticipating its future establishment as a National Marine Conservation Area and the removal of that area from the Commission's jurisdiction. I'm just wondering if the Government of Canada can provide a current update on the status of that initiative and when it may be anticipated to conclude. Thank you.
Sorry for that. Thanks for the question. Please go ahead.
Considering we don't have any representatives from Parks Canada, we'll take that question and provide a written response to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Nunavut Planning Commission staff have no further questions at this time, but they may come back as a result of other questions that get asked. I'll open the floor to community delegates now, and I will go down the table. Please put your hand up. And yeah, oh, okay. We have Paula, Alex, Kevin, Peter, John, Martha.
Just wait. Peter, John, Martha.
And Harry. Oh, and Willie. Yeah, Richard was on there. Okay. We have our list to start. That's a long list, so let's get going. Okay, Paula.
Uvanga Paula Kigueli Cusin, Hamlet of Baker Lake. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Lester. Thank you to the Government of Canada for your presentation. I have a question regarding slide 16. it looks like the floodgates are open to proponents who are interested in minerals only. They overlap with our caribou and wildlife and Inuit use of the land, hunting grounds, camping grounds, travel routes. Duty to consult to the communities. We don't usually find out that a company is around until they come to the community and have to tell us what they're going to do. I believe a step is missing. It should be the Government of Canada coming to the communities and asking us if we agree or not agree to that type of activity in those areas. Duty to consult as well for the Nunavut Planning Project Assessment Act in 2015 talks about grandfathering. As well as the draft 2021 Nunavut Land Use Plan talks about existing rights. How old are these permits or leases that are we talking about? When were they born? In the time frame of when were they, what is their start date, and how did they get to be grandfathered in without true consultation to Inuit who live and use the lands, because the Crown is the biggest landowner and represents us and other interests, but we live there 365 days a year. We don't have offices in Vancouver or China or Germany or France. They have no ties to the land other than the rock. On those map there, caribou live there, there's fresh water. How much water is used for mining and exploration that was once pristine, goes back to the environment, is now not as clean as it was. It's supposed to be, but it's never going to be. This affects our fish, our caribou, all of our wildlife, birds, and humans. Inuit who hunt, eat, clothe ourselves with these that live on top of the land, not below the land. You have a big job to do, but why do they get priority and not us Inuit? Havoktomiut, Kainangmiut, Padlangmiut, Ahengmiut, Ukusiksilingmiut. Many, many Inuit who live in this region. Where is our voice as you represent Inuit? I understand the economic part, but you don't need to open the gates wide open. Do it. We need a stepwise, slow approach, because this land has to be here forever, not just cash grab for the companies. So when you talk about your mixed use and land use rezoning. I would like you to come to the communities and discuss that as well, because you represent us too. I have another question, and I'll let you answer that. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Please go ahead, Terry.
Thank
you,
Terry
Chair.
Outla,
Terry Outla.
Indigenous Relations, Northern Affairs, Canada. The one thing, when I went through slide 16 and then the following slides after that, and I'll kind of refer back to what was said yesterday about a one-size-fits-all approach. And say at the same time that a Nunavut land use plan is not a be-all, end-all, but at the same time there are existing other institutes of public government, such as the Nunavut Impact Review Board, the Nunavut Water Board, and then the overlap areas when it comes to Crown and Inuit-owned lands. We're not suggesting in any way that we open the floodgates or anything like that. There are mechanisms and regulatory requirements and consultative requirements as well. And going through this exercise as well through the land use planning process, we respect what was negotiated, and we respect the process and the systems. And we are always looking to Inuit, and we want to hear from Inuit, the most impacted, as to how we can best approach what would be the most correct way to ensure that we maintain self-sufficiency, that we maintain the harvesting rates, that we maintain all other proponents for the purposes of carrying out what they want to do for the uses of that area, on top of all that, ensuring that it does not endanger the caribou or the wildlife or the harvesting rights for the Inuit in the area. So in summary, we rely on what was negotiated, what the current mechanisms are in place, and to ensure that the Inuit perspective is being heard. And then there's, the separate process of what Inuit organizations do as title holders and what they do to determine what rights they're going to provide, what permits they're going to provide. But I just want to reiterate that in no way are we looking at opening the floodgates, but what we need to do is to sort of be realistic as to what's actually happening on the ground, who are going to be impacted, what animals, caribou, and whatever marine mammals or other terrestrial mammals as well, to ensure that nothing is being damaged in such a way that you cannot use it once again. So I'll kind of leave it at that, but we can also provide a list of the existing mineral tenures, and we'll provide it to the Commission so that you can see from that list, the grandfathered claims or any existing tenures that are out there. I hope that answers some of your question. If I didn't, please reiterate. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the answer. Paula, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paula Kikiwilikiusin, Hamlet of Baker Lake. Thank you, Government of Canada, Terry Audla. You mentioned mineral tenure. As the Government of Canada, have you asked the communities if they're in agreement with those mineral tenures? That's my question. Have you given... What if the community is not in favor of that or in favor of that? Where's the due process to ask? Because how I see it is Government of Canada issues the permit and license before asking the communities if they're in agreement or not with that activity. I understand the process for Inuit-owned lands. I have issues with that. I participated at the Nunavut Impact Review Board hearing in 2014. It was regards to the Areva uranium project at Kigavik, which has Inuit-owned lands and Crown lands. The process as to how an exploration company has rights to the land without really asking the communities if they're in agreement or not. Consultation with the communities, understanding where they're at. Maybe we're in agreement, maybe we're not, but I have not seen the Government of Canada come to the communities to explain their stance about this 2021 draft land use plan in the community or with mineral tenure. Thank you. I hope that is clear.
Thank you for the question. Please go ahead, Terry.
And thank you for the clarification as well. When it comes to the issuance of mineral tenure, mineral claims on Crown lands in Nunavut are issued according to the Nunavut mining regulations. And there are many factors that contribute to whether a company is going to acquire tenure, such as the economy or impacts. I'll use the COVID pandemic as an example. We all know that for the past 3 years, it's been difficult. That's why we saw a decline in activity and everything else. When the MAC staking system in 2021, we saw, since it started in 2014, we saw a slight uptick in some stakes or claims. We're of the opinion that...
Closer to the mic, please.
Sorry.
Thanks.
We're of the opinion that we don't think that a large increase in tenure acquisition will occur during the planning process. And it hasn't happened to date. It's not happening now. We did send out a notice March of this year to all holders of tenure to ensure that they are informed of the plan and understanding that there's ongoing public review requirements, and that we also abide not only under the Nunavut mining regulations, but what's required under the Nunavut agreement as well. We can work with communities to share more info as to what the Nunavut regulations, mining regulations, require and what we can do better. We're always looking to see what we can do to ensure that the community's views and voices are being heard. And I will be encouraging our staff to ensure that they do go into the communities when they can, and to ensure that community members are being heard. I hope that answers the question. Chair.
Thank you, Terry. Go ahead, Paula.
Paula Kiguita Hewson, Hamlet of Baker Lake. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Government of Canada, Terry Audla. From your answer, it sounds like the rocks take precedent to everything else. You will consult. Where is the duty to consult about those minerals to the communities, if they want it or not? I understand the economic benefits and stuff, but once those rocks are gone and all the activities happen and disturb everything else that are on the ground, we'll never get them back with the money that we got at the beginning. Looking at the map on your slide 16, that's a lot of land. And a lot of land that is shared with not just the rocks. Duty to consult with the communities about that land, because that land is our land too, not just the rocks. It belongs to Inuit who are in favor of mining, but also who are also in favor of conservation of caribou, duktu. Baker Lake is the only inland Inuit community in Nunavut that relies on duktu, caribou, and fish. You have 9 Inuit groups who live there, who have ancestral ties and family home ranges, homelands that are all surrounding the land, not just the communities. The communities are a recent introduction to this land. We travel, we use the land.
Okay.
I don't know.
My issue is your duty to consult with not just
All right.
exploration and mining companies. They have a lot of money, and their duty to consult is with their shareholders. Your shareholders are us around the table and the Canadians. We don't know what's going on in our own backyard until a mining company comes to town or a helicopter lands. This was happening before the pandemic, and it happened during the pandemic. The issue is consulting with the communities besides those who are interested in just rocks. Thank you. I have more questions, but I'll wait for your answer.
Thank you, Paula. Go ahead, Terry.
Goedendag, Jivota. Those were comments. I'm not sure if there was a question in there, but I'll respond in some way to sort of the line of discussion that's happening here. Nowhere did I say in the presentation that the duty to consult priority is with those with mineral interests. those for-profit companies. Throughout, I was stating that our duty to consult is with the Inuit, and that there are mechanisms under the Nunavut Agreement that are required to ensure that Inuit views and concerns are being heard. The Nunavut Water Board, the Nunavut Impact Review Board, all of those processes in place. We rely on this process as well, the land use planning process, so that we can hear from individuals like yourself and those from the communities and the Inuit that are going to be the most impacted, that rely on their own resources, and to be able to continue with their harvesting rights, and to ensure that the health of their family is priority. I don't think the government of Canada is in any way going in the opposite direction. There are requirements when it comes to the Crown's duty to consult, and it's all specific to Indigenous people and Inuit. And we're going to remain engaged throughout this process, and we're going to ensure that all the distinct and unique aspects for Nunavut are being captured, and that we're hearing and listening to the Inuit in the communities. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind, when you look at the preamble of the Nunavut Agreement, page 1, where it says that this agreement is between the Inuit of the Nunavut settlement area, as represented by what is now Nunavut Tumavik Incorporated, and Her Majesty the Queen, rest in peace, in right of Canada. And within these objectives, within that preamble, it states that whereas the parties have negotiated this land claims agreement based on and reflecting the following objectives, there's 4 of them. The first one is to provide for certainty and clarity of rights to ownership and use of lands and resources, and of rights for Inuit to participate in decision making concerning the use, management, and conservation of land, water, and resources, including the offshore. To provide Inuit with wildlife harvesting rights and rights to participate in decision-making concerning wildlife harvesting. To provide Inuit with financial compensation and means of participating in economic opportunities, and to encourage self-reliance and the cultural and social well-being of the Inuit. We're beholden to this. And the issue on certainty and clarity of rights, and for the rights of Inuit to participate in a meaningful process in the decision-making. And this is where, like I mentioned earlier, the beauty in the design of Articles 11, 12, 13 under this agreement, where the Nunavut Planning Commission is Inuit and the Crown working together. And this is what we rely on. This is our duty to consult, and this is something that we hold very highly. So I just wanted to respond in that manner and to clarify our position as the Government of Canada.
Thank you, Terry. Due to the long list, I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask their questions, and we will come back around because it's important to ask these questions. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Terry Odla, Crown Indigenous Relations, Northern Affairs Canada. And the one thing I just wanted to point out, just so I'm clear, that slide 16, all that is signifying is those areas that you see, those are Inuit lands, surface and subsurface. Just to be clear on that.
Thank you. So what we're going to do is we're going to give everybody the opportunity to ask their question and have a follow-up, and we'll make our way through the list, and then we'll come back around, just so that everybody gets their chance. Okay. So next on the list is Richard. Richard's right here. Please go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Richard Oksani, Baker Lake Hunters and Trappers Organization. And thank you, Government of Canada, for your presentation. My question is relating to marine shipping. Our community, as you know, we have numerous shipping, not only for community resupply, but for development, fuel resupply for both development and the community. So you're looking at more than a dozen ships. But all those ships don't make it all the way to the community of Baker Lake. They do have anchorage points, mainly around an area called Helicopter Island, just past the Chesterfield Inlet Narrows. From there, majority of the shipment is being shipped up on tugs and barges. So that adds more and more shipping in between Helicopter Island and the community of Baker Lake. My question around that is, for the past decade, we're seeing ships, mainly tankers and or cargo vessels, setting up new anchorage points in very pristine areas of our hunting grounds, both terrestrial and marine. Our fishing spots are being affected by it. I know we've asked for studies and reports in past public meetings. Just recently, we're seeing postings of ships coming into the community of Baker Lake, which we do appreciate. But my question relates on how does a shipping company be granted an area which we normally don't see as an anchorage point while they're waiting for what we call the motherships, the ships that are too big to go up the narrows. Who approves these anchorage points is my question. One next vote up.
Thank you for the question. Please go ahead, Terry.
Thank you, Chair.
So we're happy to have a representative from Transport Canada that could respond to that question, and you'll recognize him. He's the guy in the video that you saw earlier. Jaideep Johar, with permission from the chair, if he could respond.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good morning, Jaydeep Johar, Transport Canada. Thank you very much for that question. As you would realize, that navigation to Chesterfield Inlet and to Baker Inlet is challenging because of the tides, because of the water depths. The reason the big ships to the larger ships.
Could you please be closer to the mic? We're having trouble. Thanks.
The reason the larger ships anchor at the helicopter island is they are not able to navigate through the narrows because of their draft. And this leads to further traffic, more traffic, as you have mentioned. With regards to your question for anchorages, there are specific anchorages which are marked on the navigation charts. The ships would anchor in the waters they feel safe to do so, looking at the depth of water and their ship's anchoring capabilities. However, if there are concerns with regards to where the ships are anchoring and it is impacting in any way, as you mentioned, marine mammals or the pristine environment there, we have a working group called Anchorage Working Group. And if you would pass your concerns to me, I'll ensure that they are discussed to inform the stakeholders and the industry of these areas where the vessels should avoid to anchor. So to summarize, please provide those waters where would you not like the ships to anchor because of the reasons. And through our consultative process, we'll make sure that it is discussed with the industry and the message is passed across. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will probably give some gentle reminders as we go along, so it's not anything about a specific question or anything like that, but just so that we keep in mind questions are to stay with the land use plan and the presentation at hand, and continue with the questioning being as quick as possible. We really appreciate that, and I will get out of the way now. Please go ahead, Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Governor of Canada, for that response. Richard Aksani, Baker Lake Hunters and Trappers Organization. If time permits, I'll come back later. I forgot what my follow-up question was going to be.
Thank you, Richard. Much appreciated. Alex is next on the list.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Sean Lester,
Vice Chair
Alex Isalog,
Sean.
Albert Hunters and Trappers.
Alex Isalog, Albert Hunters and Trappers Organization. Good morning for to all, and Kiwalik Banlik people who are listening through Isuma TV Thank you, Federal Government Representative, for your presentation. And I will ask, in line with Paula's questions, the existing rights. And it's two-pronged question, first of all. In Inuktitut, that's what it's called, respecting the land. I'll start with that. Just north of Akbet, Yasket Lake, there was a huge project in that area related to the mineral uranium called Nunguhitok in Inuktitut. For those of us who are carnivores in Akbet and throughout the region, it's our main diet source of food. And I want to make a statement. On slide 16, it talks about respecting the land, but at the same time we respect our food source. I'm no expert on what's in the topic. Uranium, from what I hear, once exposed to the surface, the surrounding area of that will not grow anything for 100 years. That's a very lengthy time. And in the meantime, if it takes that long, surely animals will not be around. Our indigenous cousins, people in the Black Lake who were telling us that they had a lot of caribou at one time come in the Area herd. They're gone because of the uranium exposure in the Black Lake community. The land has been scraped. It's an open area now. There are no plants. The color has turned gray. They said they had a lot of caribou in that area, and we learned that they have not seen any caribou for 27 years. That's a long, long length in time not to have any caribou. What if this was to happen in our region? When you talk of respect, just wanting to let you know, Akbet Hunters and Trappers Organization will not support any development projects related to uranium. It's too dangerous for everything around us, including the wildlife. And we're going to keep hearing the second question. I'll try to keep it short. Marine transport. The ice-breaking activities can be problematic as well. And the Northwest Passage up in the high Arctic, according to the map, and hearing this through TV and radio, climate change is such a big topic right now. It affects us, and the large ships traveling back and forth, the icy ice will not be able to ice properly for any use due to heavy traffic on ice breaking. The traffic of the icebreakers and larger vessels will become problematic. What is causing it? Perhaps these vessels, there are no real hard freeze up now in many areas of that part during the winter. We saw an icebreaker on the video presentation, and we see that it's breaking the ice and it's too much. Thank you. I keep it I'm keeping my question short, Sean. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please go ahead, Terry.
Thank you, Chair. The question is two-pronged, so we will have a question to the uranium you asking question, and the other one involves vessels will be answered by Jackheed.
With permission from the chair, I'll respond to the first question. I'll have JD respond to the second.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. So as it stands right now, the Government Canada does not necessarily deal with land tenure on a commodity-by-commodity basis. We know uranium is for lack of a better term, a hot potato issue, and we are aware of the Angilak uranium project near Alviet. That was started around 2016. From what we heard, it's restarting again, but we'll need to gather more information as to where they're going and what they're doing, and we can provide that information. And if there's any project proposed in relation to uranium, obviously the Nunavut Regulations Act would apply, as well as the Nunavut Impact Review Board has a process as well. That will definitely provide for opportunities for everyone around this table, everyone from Alviet, to voice their concerns and to ensure that any issues that the communities or Inuit have are heard. So I'll respond in that manner for now, but as for an update as to where that specific project is with respect to the one close to Alviet, we'll provide what we can through the commission. So that's my response for the first, and I'll hand it over to JD for the second. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Jaideep Johar, Transport Canada. We understand concerns about ice breaking and the impact it has on the ice and the ice use. We are working to understand what is the best way to address these concerns. Is it the land-based plan or another process? Should it be restrictions or collaborative processes? With regards to the video and the icebreaker, I should also point out that the Canadian icebreakers are very important because they assist in community resupply amongst other works they do. We also understand that the community resupply is exempted from the land use plan for those reasons. We have worked on a pilot project in Cambridge Bay area, trying to address the concerns you have mentioned with regards to protection of caribou and safety of hunters and trappers traveling on ice. It was a pilot project which we undertook with communities of Cambridge Bay and various organizations there, including other government departments. As a result, we were able to come to consensus and issue a notice to mariner which had cautionary measures for the vessels to transit when there is ice in the area. So to summarize, Transport Canada and Government of Canada is open to work in a collaborative processes with the communities to understand their concerns and come to a mutually agreed solution for the benefit of the communities. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the answers. Thank you for the concise questions. It's now Kevin's turn. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sean Lester, Kevin Kalok, Pearson Trappers Organization. Thank you, Government of Canada, for your presentation. And with that chance to ask a question, I did not like your responses to the questions previously. My community of Akbet, now I know many people in my community, you have responded that they will not like it appears to be two land claims agreement, and one of them appears to be in the final stage, and you also mentioned due to conscientious reality. And many times the questions are not clear, so at this stage I'm accepting what I am hearing from your answers. A land claim negotiation in our past, my parents, grandparents, and people beyond that. I know from and hearing that experience in my area, Nunavut, NWT, we try to live in cohesiveness with other tribes. And the final stage, when it comes to pass now, what will we hear? We're expecting to hear something favorable, but what at this stage? I think from what I'm hearing, it's going to surprise a lot of us. And two questions before me, and the other emphasize on duty to consult. And it appears in your question that's not a priority duty to consult, all specific to indigenous people and to Inuit.
And that Inuit to participate
And you also mentioned that you are consulting people who have inquiries. And Akbet is the closest to community to the project in question. And I understand that there are 2 claims at final stages. I wish this practice stops in Nunavut. It appears to be a staging area for presidents coming up in the future, although there's a land claims agreement. And we have that, but Inuit are not hearing firsthand when things are progressing, whatever they may be. Consult us. And you are setting precedents from just the tone of presentation that this will be an ongoing problem in the coming years. We don't know what's up ahead. And I think it's not looking good. I think it will attract similar in our future. And I think we know that this land is ours now since we first heard of signing of the agreement. Perhaps, if I sound offensive, I do apologize, and I do not have any follow-up question.
Thank you. Terry, would you like to respond?
Thank you, Chair. The questions you have asked the delegates and the other communities on the table.
In respect of the Denisilan areas and also the areas involving the Dene from the NWT, both Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated and the Kivalik Inuit Association have been closely consulted with. So I would recommend to ensure that you are being informed, included, and that all the concerns are being included. But I'm quite confident that that both Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated and the Kivalik Inuit Association are doing that, and to ensure that the voices of Alvea Mutai are being heard. When it comes to the plan by the Nunavut Planning Commission for approval, when it comes to how close the agreements are to being finalized, those 2 land claim agreements, plan approval will be undertaken in accordance with what's in the Nunavut Agreement and the Nunavut Planning and Project Assessment Act. And based on that, we will be seeking approval from Nunavut Tungavik Incorporated, the Government of Nunavut Executive Council, and it's required that we do that. You mentioned that the provisions of the draft agreement are confidential. until they are final. So I can't really speak to those. The provisions of those agreements will apply when the agreements are signed and they are in effect. Before a Government of Canada decision is taken, Government of Canada will ensure the duty of the Crown to consult has been fulfilled, and same idea. Nuna betunga viku takwa kivelomini katutihatigi akotigi lugu tabba tekuna gumaktugu. And the intent of that is to ensure that we get consent. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for the response. I'd like to thank the participants for the questions so far. It is pretty much lunchtime. So before we take the next question, I think it's time for a break for lunch. We will come back for a 1:15, that's 1:15 start. And I believe we will probably end up having an evening session tonight, because I think there's a lot of interaction going on, and we want to make sure everybody has a chance. So just to put it out there, don't be surprised if we have an evening session to make sure all questions are asked and answered. Thank you. See you after lunch.